What's up, everybody? I'm Pat Biondi here with the Elevate Movement podcast. Today we have a great guest for you. She's a sideline reporter for the Chicago Blackhawks, Big Ten Network analyst, sideline reporter, host, University of Michigan grad, volleyball player. You can follow her on Instagram. We'll put a link down there. I think it's Mish_McMahon.
Yep.
You can check out the Elevate Movement, learn more about the podcast and the company at _Elevate_Movement. We'll put all that down there. But here she is, Michelle McMahon. Michelle, Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's so fun to have you in the city and rekindle some old friendships from the good old college days.
Go Blue.
Yeah, I love it. It's so fun to be here. Thanks for thinking of me.
Absolutely. I think, we talked a little bit before then. We've had some good conversations pre-recording right now, but I saw some of your posts about just what you've gone through from college to now and just kind of your journey, and it seemed to line up so much with what I wanted to do with Elevate and just communicating, connecting with people, sharing your story. And so I was really excited to be able to meet up and talk about this. So.
Yeah, for sure. And this is the first time I've definitely written about it, and I've been open about it with my friends and conversations, but this is the first platform, I guess, speaking about it. So
that's awesome. Okay, good.
Yeah, so I'm excited to share. I'm an open book at this point, so
perfect.
Happy to.
We can go on this journey together then, because this is all new to me. So awesome. I'll just jump right into it. I was actually reading something that you wrote earlier about the Ideal Self Project, and I actually used a couple of those things before coming here because this is all new to me. So I started to think about, okay, how do I want to sound? What do I want?
Oh, cool.
What do I want people to look at in this podcast?
Yeah.
And just going through it, I think it's a lot of stuff that I've kind of gone through too. And so if you just want to talk a little bit about what the Ideal Self Project is, what it's meant to you.
Yeah, that was a project that was assigned to me in our athletic days at Michigan. I worked with a sports psychologist for 4 years, Greg Harden, who I've talked very openly about too. I still love to this day. But to me, he gave me the assignment of what does the ideal Michelle look like to you? Like, you're not there now, but that, like, how can we open up your perspective on, like, what you could be? And, like, even if it seems so unrealistic to you right now in, like, the vulnerable place you're at with all the, mental stuff you deal with being a student athlete that I don't think necessarily gets addressed as much. Maybe it does more so now than then. But to really think about and expand your mind of, like, okay, so what would an ideal me look like? And that opened up, I think, the roadmap of, like, what I was becoming. You know what I mean? I think we're always transforming and evolving as people. So I think it's good to, like, do that project in college. And here's what Michelle would be in a perfect world, in my mind, a full, confident, careless but successful person. Like, here, so I had to write out an essay, a page long, of, like, what would I be wearing? What would I look like? What would I sound like? What would other people see in me, even though that's not necessarily the top priority? What would I see in me? What would make me feel confident in myself?
Yep.
And so I think it's good to revisit. And I actually probably should do another one, because now I feel like I've reached a point where I'm like, I feel like a lot of those qualities I embody, and that's something that, like, I take a lot of pride in, with just being able to be myself. Like, I still definitely deal with some, certain aspects of the anxiety and everything that I dealt with in college, but I have taken so many strides in becoming the person that I wrote down on that project. So it was just something that I wanted to share with other people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I felt like as I read it, I actually was thinking, okay, like a lot of these are lining up pretty much with, like, what's been happening in your life, at least career-wise.
Yes.
I haven't spoke to you in a while, so personally I don't know how much of that you feel in your everyday life, but just exteriorly it looked like it all lined up. So I was actually going to ask you, as you move forward, like, not that you have to write the whole thing out again, but you've accomplished a lot of the goals that you wanted to accomplish. But obviously just getting there, it doesn't mean that now life's good, everything's perfect.
Right.
So I guess how has that measured up to your expectation of what it would be? And has it fulfilled you to the level you thought it would? What are some things that maybe are deeper than just the goals of being a sideline, like working with the Blackhawks, working with the Big Ten Network, that are maybe foundational to you being able to do that?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question, right? Because I think in my life, I've always been an achiever, and that's where I've always sought my validation as well. Like, so when I strived to be the Blackhawks reporter 5 years ago, when that dream felt like, no way, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, there's only one person that does it. You're going to do it. And even with Big Ten Network, that was, you know, I started with them in 2012, and I was like, I want to sit in that hosting chair. I want to be like just like the guys that are doing it. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to be sideline reporting at a game at Michigan. Like, all of these things were like such lofty goals at the time. I mean, just to back up a little bit into my story, when I graduated from Michigan as a student athlete. I didn't start, you know, headfirst in broadcasting. I was selling freight to truck drivers in my first career here in Chicago. And then I switched to medical device sales. In the meantime, I was building up my broadcast resume reel, and I always knew that that was a passion of mine that was pulling me towards that. I don't really know why or like how, but clearly it's part of my purpose here because
athletics.
Yeah, well, being involved with sports, but then the on-camera side was just like so fun. It's like performing like an athlete. Like, you get out there, you study the best you can, and then you go out there and you're vulnerable. There's nothing more vulnerable than being in front of the camera and you're about to display your report, and sometimes it goes awesome, and other times you're like, oh, why'd I say that? I would never say that in a conversation. But just to back up and set the table for where I was coming from with those lofty dreams. But then when you get there, so like I remember 4 years ago, whenever it was, I was selling medical devices, I was watching TV, I wanted to be more than just a volleyball analyst, which is what I was with Big Ten Network in my first go with them, and I was watching the Stanley Cup final when the Blackhawks were winning 3 in the last 6 years, and I was like, God, I hate my job. I hate medical device sales. I loved the product. I loved the concept of it. Like, I hate sales. I hate asking people for money. I want to do that. Like, I want to be in sports. But the journey that led me there was just so, like, zigging and zagging. But now that I'm here, the fulfillment part, to your point, is your job's never going to bring you that fulfillment that you think it's going to. Or if you make it to the major leagues in baseball, like, that's not it. Like, it is a significant part of it. And, like, am I so proud of myself and do I love my job now? Absolutely. But there's so much more to life, and if you don't harness those other things, you know, within yourself, like, I was chasing for so long, it almost distracted me from the personal side of everything that I have now learned this last year and a half, I would say, even deeper on every other level, that like, whoa, like, it started to catch up with me, things that, you know, moving 4 times in 4 years. You guys in professional athletics, you deal with that as well, and it was all a distraction. It was wonderful career-wise, but then when it came to a halt, once I finally achieved what was my end goal when I started, being back here in Chicago, working for the Blackhawks, working for Big Ten Network in that capacity, college football, college basketball, college game day show, that was like, these were all dreams that I had, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here.
Yeah.
But then it caught up with me. Like, all the mental and emotional and all of the other stressors and anxieties that I don't think I ever dealt with during the moving process. I just kind of pushed them down and powered through because that's the only way I knew how.
Yeah, and so, okay, talk a little bit about some of those stresses and anxieties that occurred once you got back here.
Yeah, it all occurred along the way. I think we talked about this before the podcast was starting, but like some of those belief patterns some of those negative thought programs that you don't know are going on in the background that are ruling so much of your life, like, and that can show up in physical illness. Like, that's what happened for me. I've had like a couple of different awakenings in different points in different ways. Greg Harden, that was a like, whoa, okay, all the work he taught me, by the way, is still coming true in my current life. Then losing one of my best friends from home, that was another like, oh my God, when that happened in 2016, that was like devastating and life-altering for me too. So that was another awakening. And then the third awakening was like me physically. Like that, it took like, I had, being on television, so talk about stressors and anxiety, I had cystic acne. Like, and that sounds like, oh, okay, trivial. You know, everybody's suffering is different. But for me, that was one of the worst things that could have happened.
You're on the camera all the time.
I'm on camera all the time. I'm already self-critical. Like, there's nobody else that's going to be meaner to me than I am in my own brain. So, like, I would watch my interviews back and just be like, oh, my God. Everyone's looking at that mountain on your chin. And, like, it came out in a hurry and, like, just, like, furiously. So that was one thing, one physical stressor and something that caused a lot of anxiety and a lot of, like, me seeking all these alternative healing modalities to make myself better. And then I had some other, health imbalances, my thyroid, all this other stuff, which is kind of on the physical side of things. But that gives you anxiety. And then also in this career path, I've never done it to be like, look at me, I'm on camera. Like, I'm not a model type. Like, I don't think of myself that way. Like, I'm not a size 0 blonde on the sideline. Like, I am me. I've always been an athletic build. I'm a redhead. I'm very pale skin. Like, my whole life I've been trying to compensate to be like everybody else. Like, I've tried, I used to get spray tans every week. Still do here now and again. But I always felt like I was being evaluated sometimes about the ways I was looking instead of the content I was bringing to the table.
I think there's a reality to that when you talk about the sports world and sideline reporting and stuff. You turn on ESPN and there's a pretty similar look to a lot of the females that are doing sideline reporting. So, I mean, that's again, like we talk about, one of the reasons I want to do this podcast and I talk to you about is I think there's a misperception that people that are successful don't have anxieties and don't have doubts and fears and all that stuff
every day.
And it couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, it might be amplified because of the audience that you have. So now all of a sudden, instead of your average person having anxieties of what's going on with their family and all that stuff, but it's all kind of in a tight circle, now you're in front of everybody that's watching a Chicago Blackhawks game, everyone that's on Big Ten Network. There's a lot of voices that you hear on top of your own that are kind of giving you feedback, and you either validate them or don't, but it's something to deal with, and it causes anxiety and stress. So I think I completely understand where you're coming from.
And fear. Fear is a big one.
So let's talk about that, like maybe how you've experienced fear, but also what you've done to keep getting on camera, to keep doing what you want to do and furthering your career and just kind of overcoming that fear.
Yeah, fear has surfaced for me in so many different ways and different levels. So it's a broad topic, but I think every day I have to face fear in my job, and I've gotten a lot better at that. I think where the fear stems from for me, though, is the fear of not being good enough. Like, that is something, like, in volleyball I experienced that, and then on air, and, like, also on television, you have no choice but to go out there and to, like, well, even if I'm not good enough, at least for me, I'm like, I can put a mask on better than anybody else and look like I'm confident. And when I'm giving my reports, I have gotten to a point where my confidence on the outside has matched my confidence on the inside. But there are certain moments when that hasn't been the case. And so that fear, I think, that had been ruling me stems down to different levels of self-worth that I wasn't really aware of really up until the last year when I had to do the deep work on myself and really like do the digging of like, where is this coming from? Like, why am I so worried about what even some of the people I work with, what they're thinking of me, or what, if I say this wrong, oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble here, like this, because your mistakes are magnified, right? Like, you say one stat wrong and you could have 100 people after you on social media. I haven't really dealt with, I'm fortunate enough, I don't know if I just put my blinders on, but I really don't deal with trolls too much. But that part, so you have to face fear, at least for me, every single day. You're vulnerable. You're putting yourself on camera. You're trying to put your best foot forward. And at the end of the day, it's such a subjective job. No, you can't make everybody happy.
Right.
Like, somebody might not like my work because of the way my voice sounds, or they don't like how I look, or they don't whatever. And it's like such an easy like target, because you see somebody on TV or you see somebody out in public. It's just so easy to be like, she doesn't know what she's talking about, or he's terrible at his job. And it's like, we forget that there are human beings behind the lens. And that's also something in my reporting, no matter what, in college or professional, I always try to keep in mind, like, there are people behind the stories we're telling. And that's where I've started to really channel my gifts, I guess, or like shift that fear to like, why am I here? Like, what's my purpose here? And for a while I didn't have an answer to that, like really truly, of just really understanding what it was.
It was so much goal oriented, like so much like your purpose was achieving these things. And
exactly. And then now it's kind of shifted of like, I at least embrace my role as like, I'm a spokesperson for the athletes that don't have a voice in this game right now. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm talking to a player before the game, like, I take that trust very seriously. You know what I mean? And if they share something with me that they don't want on air, I'll never do that. I always try and put the best foot forward and shine them in the best positive light that I can too.
I think brought up a lot of really interesting topics of conversation, but I think just that idea of, you think about our normal conversation, or not our, but in general, conversation about athletes or reporters or anybody in the media, and people talk about people they've never met, never talked to, really don't know anything about, as if they grew up with, like, criticize people for, I hate LeBron, I hate so and so,
right?
And I never really thought much about it until I got closer to that, and you start to realize, like you said, like, you're talking about how much you hate a human being that you've never met before, and, like, it starts innocently enough, like, you're just talking mostly about, like, as a player or whatever, which is fine, but it's funny how quickly those conversations get, like, emotional, and people start, like, really getting fired up about, like, who they don't like or who they do like, and it's just funny to me, like, I've had to remind myself, and I try to keep that awareness more now, like you said, of not getting into those conversations in the first place, but just, like, being more mindful of the fact that we might be talking about something that we have no idea about. Like,
or, like, what's really going on behind closed doors. Like, there's so many situations where it's like, you have no idea what that person's going through. Or, like, on somebody's Instagram, it, like, might look like a highlight reel, but, like, they could be harboring a lot of anxiety and depression, and, like, your words are really powerful, and that could change the scope of somebody's day or life, you know what I mean? Like, that's why, like, bullying is not just with children. It is, the adult bullying is very real, and it's something that I'm very passionate about because I feel like I've been a victim of it, you know what I mean? I've had to, like, transform that in my mind of, like, okay, especially working in a man's world, like, it's not easy. It's not easy being, you know, not one of a couple of females everywhere I go, and that I do feel that pressure, and there's sometimes where I'm not embraced even by some certain people that I work with, and that's hard. But it's not cool to be a bully on any level, whether you're sitting in your basement just chirping at somebody randomly on social media, or if you're in the workplace and you're bullying other people. But the thing I think I've learned the most about when other people treat you poorly, or when other people don't like you or can't find a reason why they would ever like you, it's just a projection of how they're feeling on the inside.
Insecurities, anxieties, all that stuff.
So that has helped me, I guess, with people, you know, that I've just in relationships where I've struggled. I'm like, well, you know what? I developed that empathy because I'm like, well, really deep down, they're just really not happy with themselves, and I feel that empathy because I've been there before. Yeah. There's been moments in my life where I haven't liked myself, so it's like, I see you, and I understand that only hurt people hurt other people.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, socially and stuff, I've always been interacted fine and, like, got along with people and been able to do that whole thing. So I never really thought about how much I really care about what other people think, how much I think about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I've gone down the road of, like, mindfulness and just, like, trying to follow my thoughts and emotions and stuff. Yeah. Just like you said, there's so many times that, like, my anxieties or my whatever's going on are the direct result of me worrying what so-and-so is going to think, how this is going to come off, what I'm saying right now, like, all that stuff. And I think one of the things I've tried to do when I run into that, when I run into either negativity or just, like, my own, like, worries and fears, is kind of reminding myself that the anxieties that I'm feeling right now are a lot of my own doing. Like, it's a thought process that I'm giving credit to that doesn't have to be there. Yeah. You know, so, like, I guess for me, just recognizing, like, you want to talk about, like, true worth or anything like that, just that understanding of who you are doesn't change because of someone else's opinion of you. Right. And once you realize that, like, I think it, especially in a world where, like, you're on camera all the time, you're exposed to other opinions all the time, it's a constant reminder. Like, it's never just, like, now I'm at this point where I don't care what people think and, like, life is boom. But I think it's doable, though. I think it is something that you can keep your perspective. For sure. And kind of, even if you feel, you know, that negativity for a moment, like, be able to get back into where you want to be mentally. Yeah. On a quicker response time than maybe, like, I've done in my past, or, like, you know, I think that's that growth part. Yeah. Right.
And I think, too, we live in a society in which so many people seek their worth in so many different places in their life other than within themselves. And I think that's another key component of, like, I was always good at sports, so that was part of my identity, so I latched onto that for so long. And then with life after sports, it's like, okay, I skyrocketed through sports broadcasting once I fully committed to it, that I latched onto that as part of my identity. The problem with that is when you latch onto the things that you're doing or being, and no doubt that that's a part of you, but for me, it was like I had to really face what the turmoil was inside of me, that why was I so concerned with what other people might be thinking, or why was I put other people's opinions of me ahead of myself, and instead taking that inward, and if I'm okay with myself, and if I know I'm of high integrity, and if I'm doing things the right way, I'm, being genuine in my interactions, I'm genuine in my workplace, then it doesn't matter what anyone else says, it's not going to be able to get to you in that way.
I think I have a question for you, just like quick comment, like that reminds me of something I read. Gary Vee is like an online, really successful entrepreneur. Now he kind of is like a guru for online entrepreneurs and how to run your business. And he talks about that fear of being genuine on camera and like other people viewing you as genuine versus saying like, oh, I don't know if that's real. And his whole thing is, if you're you over time, like that'll play itself out. If you're not over time, that'll play itself out. So like, if your intentions are true, if you're actually being genuine and doing what you like to do and interacting with people that way, even if someone watches you one time and is like, I don't know, like that seemed kind of fake, like if you're doing that on a consistent basis, it's going to come out. Like people are going to understand and see that.
And regardless, I think too, the journey of figuring out who that you is, like who are you? What, take away sports, take away money, take away the job, take away anything you've accomplished in your life, who are you? And that's part of the journey too. And I think, to your point, to be genuine, you have to be really comfortable with who you are, or start to be like understand who you are. We're all different human beings. I think everybody on this earth has unique individual gifts that if we just paid attention and would harness them and would be accepted for who we are. But a lot of us walk around not knowing who we are because we've been subjected to a lot of societal programming that tells us we have to fit in X box and we have to do X job to have X amount of money and X amount of success, when really, like, if you look at the people that are the most successful, they've never followed the status quo. They've always kind of gone off and done their own thing or have gone against the norm. So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle of, like, doing the work to figure out who you are.
So what were some of the things that you did to figure out who you are, like whether it was journaling or meditating or reading, or just kind of like give me some of the things that you've done in the last year or two that have helped you to learn more about yourself?
Great question. Yes, I have been somebody, I guess I'm similar to, I don't know if it's like a masculine energy, if that's the proper way to put it, but like in terms of how I dealt with emotions in the past, like even growing up with my family, just this will kind of come full circle once I like, no, but basically like I would never process my emotions. I would just get really like fired up inside and just kind of keep it there. And so this last year,
I can relate a lot to that.
like I didn't think I had the language for it either to really verbalize how I was feeling or why I was feeling that way. And now the last year I've done so much growth in just really processing through feelings, good and bad. They can exist together. Like I would always just be like, I only want to feel the good. I don't want to feel the bad. So like you push that down, and that comes back to bite you, I think. So I've done a lot of journaling. I am a podcast nerd. I love self-growth podcasts. I have taken a deep dive into like faith-based learning too, and spirituality. I had to really reevaluate my relationship or my understanding of religion, if you will. That's something that I think I'm still unfolding, and grew up Catholic, but I had to figure out what that meant for me and in a context that worked in my life. So that has really helped me in feeling like I'm connected to my friend that passed away and that I'm connected to a greater purpose. I read a lot of books. I highly recommend Brene Brown and her books about vulnerability leading to connection, and The Gifts of Imperfection is a book that I'm currently reading, and it hits on so many points of like owning your story, the good and the bad, like owning the parts of you that even bring a lot of shame towards your life, and like finding those people that you really, really trust. Like I'm so lucky to have a really good group of supportive people that really care about me and my well-being, and like I can tell them anything. I can dump anything on them and they lift me back up in that way. And then another thing I did this last year, which was really empowering and kind of a big turning point in my healing process, because I still am on the healing journey that I set out for last year. I took a trip to Italy. I started the trip with Courtney Boylan, who is a mutual friend of ours from Michigan. And then I ended it, her name's now Courtney Douglas, by the way. I ended it with a solo trip by myself all the way through Italy. So an international solo trip is something that really, I mean, if you don't like yourself, and last year I struggled. January through March were another rock bottom moment, was another rock bottom moment for me. But taking that trip, really, it let me just sit with myself and just be, and just allowed me to do whatever I wanted. It gave me permission to just sit there and process through things. I journaled a lot. I met new people. It was a rediscovery process for me of just okay, where am I struggling here? Why am I struggling? Where are these things coming from? I felt like I was handling so much stuff on the inside, and I was just I couldn't really understand it. But taking trips like that and getting out there in the world and meeting people and connecting with people who don't know who you are and don't care what you do for a living and literally could care less. They just want to connect with you. Human connection is so important, and it's so easy to get isolated when you're in those really hard moments of anxiety and depression and negative self-talk. But connecting with people that you care about and in person, you can FaceTime all you want. Unfortunately, a lot of my really close friends and support system are away, but to just get that human connection or just get into nature, go for walks. I love going for walks. I love going to the water. Finding those things that make you really happy and light you up, and doing that. And that comes with, you have to have good boundaries with that too. So that's something that helps.
That's one for me too, that I was never an outdoors person growing up.
Yeah, me either.
Because I was always playing basketball or baseball or soccer or football, whatever it was at the time, And in the last probably 4 years, I've started by going to the beach a lot, going to the water and stuff.
Get your feet in the sand. Oh,
kind of evolved into getting into the mountains and hiking and camping and all that stuff. And I can completely relate to that. I even last year was doing a thing. We had I forget what the app's called, but it's something you clip on. It monitors your pulse, and it's supposed to monitor your cohesion between your brain waves and heart waves.
Awesome! Yeah.
And I just felt whenever I would go to the beach or something, that I would come back a completely different person.
Wow.
So I kind of used that a little bit.
Yeah.
And it did it totally lowered kind of the heart rate, the cohesion was higher, and it's an interesting concept, because I think to me the way I look at it and just things I've learned over the years, I feel nature has a certain frequency and vibration, and when you're around
agree with that.
You start to mirror that, and especially you live in Chicago, it's a big city, it's fast paced. I think you mirror that when you live here, just naturally, it's a fast paced life, the traffic, everything is fast paced, and so I think just taking time to get into nature just allows you to kind of slow back down to your natural state of what life was like before all the technology, before all that stuff,
And just being present and breathing with it, and just appreciating the small things, because if you can't appreciate, a beautiful lake walk, or even in the dull of winter in Chicago, which can be brutal sometimes, especially for somebody like me who's can be very vulnerable with the seasonal depression. I've definitely been able to manage that a lot better too. But if you can't appreciate the little things, you're never going to appreciate anything. Nothing's ever going to be good enough for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's one thing that I've definitely noticed for myself. And one of my mentors and people that have helped guide me through this process this last year have told me, she's get plants in your apartment. So I went out and got a bunch of plants, and they
Hopefully
actually
we can
do
see
help.
them in the shop.
Yeah, and it sounds a little weird and just kind of or at least me 2 years ago would have been what? Get out of nature. What does that have to do with anything? But really, it does help. And getting to the sun, says the ginger who gets sunburned literally looking at it for a second. But I plan sunshine trips every month to get away and to just breathe and to just be and to slow down. Slow down. Oh my gosh. That's part of the reason I think I got kind of physically ill with other things that I had been dealing with, is because it was homegirl, you need to slow down, because this is not sustainable what we're doing right now.
That's the tough part about the balance of of what you're doing though, right? Because you are so goal oriented, and that's a good thing. Like it's a good thing to be really passionate about what you do, to invest a lot of time and energy and effort into it. Like that's all good, but it's easy to lose perspective and like that's the only thing, and it's not. And like I think realistically, and you probably are experiencing this right now, and it's something that I've gone up and down with in my career, and am learning more and more that when I take time to like actually invest in my own well-being, whether it's meditating or any way to slow down basically, and just like not feel like you have to do a million things right now, all of a sudden you start becoming more productive and doing the things you want to do anyway. So it's like,
and finding joy in them.
It's that paradox, right? Of like
totally
doing something that seems counterintuitive, like let me take 20 minutes right now that
even
I could be using
a minute.
Like that I could be using to get something done, and go and not do anything.
Yes.
And like I think there's some resistance to that, at least for especially athletes probably, when everything's about, that's one, not totally ingrained in the culture yet.
Oh my
as
gosh,
far
no.
as
we're go. You have to work really hard. Work yourself to the ground at the cost of what?
I think
you're miserable.
I think that work hard one too is a funny term, because on the one hand, like you have to put a lot of time into what you want to do if you want to be good. But at a certain point, at least this is how I felt, that mentality for me has been overwork. So like maybe some insecurities I had, whether it was like in my swing in baseball or something, to compensate for that, I'll practice for an hour more.
Right.
But I'm